My name is Bailey Thornton, 25 years old. Last month at a family dinner, my older brother laughed straight in my face, his voice dripping with contempt. Useless. You can't even afford a piece of bread. The entire table went silent. My parents didn't say a word, their eyes avoiding mine. I felt the sting of his words carrying the weight of years of being dismissed. But I didn't argue. I just smiled, stood up, and walked away. His smug grin burned into my mind, but I knew something he didn't. Those words were the final push. A week later, my phone buzzed nonstop with his calls, desperate, pleading voicemails piling up. I didn't answer. I sent only one text. No more bread. That was it. The moment I finally took back control. What led to that dinner? And why was he begging me afterward? My family thought they could use me forever, but I had other plans. Stick around to see how I turned the tables. Have you ever been looked down on by your own family or loved ones only for them to come back begging? Share your story in the comments below. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in a 3-bedroom house on a quiet street, the kind where neighbors waved and kids rode bikes until dark. From the outside, we looked like any middle-class family stable. Comfortable, nothing flashy. But inside, things were different. My father, a warehouse manager, lost his job when I was 15. The company downsized, and he came home one day with a cardboard box of his things, his face tight with anger. My mother, who worked part-time at a law firm as a receptionist, started picking up extra hours, but it wasn't enough. Bills piled up and the fridge was often half empty. I saw the stress in their eyes, the way they'd whisper about money when they thought I wasn't listening. By 17, I was working after school as an IT support assistant at a small tech company downtown. I'd fix printers, reset passwords, and troubleshoot software for $10 an hour. Every paycheck, I handed over half to mom and dad to help with groceries or the electric bill. They'd thank me, but it always felt like an expectation, not a choice. Meanwhile, my older brother was their golden child. He'd always been the one they pinned their hopes on, charismatic, confident, the son who could do no wrong. They poured every spare dollar into his big idea, a startup selling fitness apps. They called it his ticket to success, paid for his office space, even bought him a used car to get to investor meetings. Me, I wanted to work in tech too, not just fixing computers, but building software, creating something real. I'd spend nights watching coding tutorials on a beat-up laptop, dreaming of becoming a programmer. But whenever I mentioned it, Dad would scoff. "Tech's not for girls like you," he'd say, shaking his head. "Stick to something practical." Mom was worse. She'd compare me to my brother, her voice sharp. "Why can't you be more like him? He's going places." It stung, but I swallowed it. I kept my head down, worked my shifts, and sent money home, even when it meant skipping meals to save a few bucks. Their favoritism wasn't subtle. At dinner, they'd brag about his latest pitch to investors, how he was destined for greatness. I'd sit there picking at my food while they ignored my straight A's, or the fact that I'd taught myself Python. Once I tried showing Mom a small app I'd built a budget tracker for our family. She glanced at it, shrugged, and said, "That's nice, but your brother's app is going to change lives." I felt invisible. He'd come home with stories of meetings in fancy coffee shops while I was stuck debugging code for clients who barely noticed me. Yet, I kept sending money, $200 here, $300 there, because they said we were a team, a family. It wasn't just the money. It was the way they made me feel like my dreams didn't matter. Dad once laughed when I mentioned applying to a tech program at the university. "You a coder?" he said like it was a joke. My brother would chime in, smirking, stick to answering phones. "Sis," I'd bite my tongue, but each jab built a quiet anger inside me. I started keeping track of every dollar I gave them in an app on my phone. Not sure why. At first, just a gut feeling I'd need it someday. By my senior year of high school, their favoritism was impossible to ignore. After years of my family's dismissal, I stopped seeking their approval. I poured everything into building a life they couldn't touch. In my senior year of high school, I landed a part-time job at a small tech startup in Albuquerque, handling basic IT support. It was grunt work, resetting passwords, untangling printer jams, but it paid and I was hungry for more. While my parents slept and my brother chased investors, I stayed up late teaching myself to code. Free online courses were my escape. On a creaky old laptop, I learned Python, JavaScript, and SQL, building small apps like a task tracker for my work schedule or a budget calculator. Each line of code was a brick in the wall between me and their expectations. The startup saw my drive. They moved me from IT support to assisting with back-end development. I spent hours debugging scripts, writing database queries, and learning from senior developers who tossed me scraps of advice. While taking college classes in computer science, I picked up freelance gigs building websites for local cafes or designing simple tools for small businesses. Every paycheck went into a secret savings account. I'd learned to keep my wins hidden. If I mentioned my job to Mom, she'd sigh and say, "Your brother's company will be bigger than that." Dad would grumble about my computer hobby wasting time. So, I stayed silent. I wore thrift store clothes, lived in a cramped shared apartment, and ate cheap meals to keep my money safe from their endless requests. By the time I was close to graduating, my persistence paid off. The startup offered me a full-time programmer position with a salary of $60,000 a year. It felt like a lifeline, a chance to stand on my own. I didn't tell my family. They still thought I was barely scraping by, handing over chunks of my earnings whenever they called. I'd given them thousands over the years. $5,000 for the mortgage, $2,000 for their car repairs, $400 for random utility bills. I tracked every cent in a budgeting app I'd built myself, not because I wanted to, but because something told me I'd need proof one day. There, where a family mantra felt more like a leash than a bond. While I built my life quietly, my brother's world was all flash and no substance. His social media was a parade of lies. Photos of him leaning against a new car, standing in a glass-walled office captioned with "crushing it" or "entrepreneur life." Friends fawned over his posts, calling him a trailblazer. But I heard the truth from mutual contacts. His fitness app company was drowning in debt. He'd taken out massive loans, defaulted on vendor payments, and scrambled to keep up appearances. That shiny car financed to the hilt, the office a leased facade he could barely afford. I saw through the act, but my parents didn't. They kept boasting about his success, blind to the cracks in his empire. I kept my head down, coding, saving, and tracking their demands. My app logged every dollar I sent, dates, amounts, reasons, because I knew their loyalty was to my brother, not me. Each transfer felt like a betrayal I was funding, but I wasn't ready to confront them yet. I was building something bigger than they could imagine, and I wouldn't let them take it away. One family dinner changed everything. The air was thick with tension the night we gathered to celebrate Mom's birthday. We sat in a dimly lit corner of a local Albuquerque restaurant, a family-friendly spot with checkered tablecloths and the hum of chatter around us. The table was crowded with plates of pasta and half-eaten garlic bread, but the mood wasn't festive. My parents were quieter than usual, their smiles forced. My brother, as always, dominated the conversation, bragging about his latest investor pitch while swirling a glass of wine. I sat across from him, picking at my food, trying to ignore the familiar knot in my stomach. Family dinners always felt like a performance, and I was tired of playing my part. Halfway through the meal, he turned his attention to me. His smirk was sharp, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "So," he said loud enough for nearby tables to glance over, "still working that dead-end tech job?" "Useless. You can't even afford a piece of bread." The words hit like a slap. The table went silent. Mom stared at her plate, pushing a meatball around with her fork. Dad coughed and reached for his water, avoiding my eyes. No one spoke up. No one defended me. The sting wasn't just from his words. It was their silence, their complicity. I felt my face burn a mix of shame and fury, but I forced a tight smile. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. I stood, excused myself, and walked out to the parking lot, my hands shaking as I gripped my car keys. Outside, the cool desert air hit my face, but it didn't calm the rage building inside. I paced near my beat-up sedan, replaying his words, their laughter echoing in my head. I was done being their punching bag. As I leaned against the car, trying to steady my breathing, my grandfather approached. Grandpa, always quiet at these gatherings, had a heaviness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. He looked around, making sure we were alone, then spoke in a low voice. "Bailey, there's something you need to know." he said. My stomach dropped. He explained that Mom and Dad had taken out a loan $50,000 using my name, my credit, without my permission. They'd done it to bail out my brother's failing company, thinking I'd never find out. Grandpa had overheard them discussing it, and he couldn't stay silent anymore. I stood frozen, my mind racing. $50,000, my name, my future tangled in their lies to prop up someone who mocked me in front of everyone. I wanted to scream to march back inside and confront them, but I couldn't. Not yet. Grandpa's hand rested on my shoulder, his voice steady. "You're stronger than they think," he said. "Do what you need to do." I nodded, my jaw tight, my resolve hardening. They'd crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let it slide. I drove home that night, my anger turning into a plan. By morning, I was determined to uncover the truth. I logged into my bank account, hands trembling as I scrolled through statements. There it was, a loan opened 2 years ago, tied to my name with monthly payments I'd never authorized. The balance was staggering, and the interest was climbing fast. My heart pounded as I realized the depth of their deception. They'd gambled my future to prop up my brother's failing company, and I'd been clueless. I dug deeper, pulling up every piece of evidence I could find. I checked my email, searching for any bank correspondence. Buried in my spam folder were notifications, confirmation emails for loan applications, payment reminders, all addressed to me but sent to an account I rarely used. I printed them out, my hands shaking with anger as I read the fine print. I cross-referenced my budgeting app, the one I'd built to track the money I gave my family. The numbers didn't lie alongside the thousands I'd willingly sent for bills they had been siphoning more through this loan. I found a paper trail of bank statements and transfer receipts in a shared family account I hadn't checked in years. Each document felt like a stab proof of how far they'd gone to exploit me. I needed help, someone who could make sense of this mess. I reached out to a lawyer in Albuquerque, a woman named Carla Martinez, who specialized in financial fraud. Her office was small, tucked above a coffee shop, but her reputation was solid. I brought my stack of evidence-printed emails, bank statements, screenshots of my app's transaction logs. She listened as I explained the loan, my voice cracking as I described Grandpa's confession. Carla's eyes narrowed when I mentioned the $50,000 figure. "This is identity theft," she said plainly. "Your parents and brother used your credit without consent. We can build a case." She outlined the process: file a police report, gather more evidence, and sue for damages. It wouldn't be quick, but it was possible. I left her office with a plan and a spark of hope. Denise Ray, my best friend since college, became my anchor through this. We met at a diner the next day, the smell of greasy fries filling the air as I poured out everything. Denise, always calm under pressure, listened without interrupting. She dealt with her own family drama. Her parents had guilt-tripped her into paying their debts years ago. "You can't let them manipulate you," she said, her voice firm. "They're counting on your silence." She helped me stay grounded, reminding me to eat, to breathe, to focus on the next step instead of drowning in anger. We spent hours at my apartment sorting through documents, labeling each piece of evidence for Carla. Denise's quiet strength kept me from falling apart. I didn't stop working. My job at the tech startup demanded focus, and I threw myself into coding to keep my mind steady. I'd spend mornings writing scripts, afternoons in meetings, and evenings preparing my case. I requested credit reports, contacted the bank to freeze the loan account, and documented every interaction. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. My parents had signed my name on the loan application, and my brother had used the funds to pay his company's debts. They'd planned to keep me in the dark, assuming I'd never check. A week after the dinner, I noticed a shift. Mom called twice, her voice unusually soft, asking how I was doing. Dad sent a text something about checking in. My brother left a voicemail, his tone nervous, asking me to meet up. They were fishing, sensing something was off. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to confront them, not until my case was airtight. Carla warned me they might try to guilt me into dropping it, but I was done being their doormat. I kept my evidence locked in a safe, my resolve growing with every new document I found. My family's attempts to sway me began subtly, but grew relentless. It started with a phone call from Dad, his voice heavy with accusation. I was at my desk reviewing code when my phone buzzed. Bailey, you're tearing this family apart. He said, his tone sharp. After everything we've done for you, you're being selfish. Drop this lawsuit nonsense. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white, but stayed silent. His words echoed the guilt trips I'd heard growing up, always about what I owed them. I ended the call without a word, my heart racing. I wasn't a kid anymore, and I wasn't falling for it. A few days later, Mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, eyes red, clutching a tissue. She stepped inside, her voice trembling as she launched into a speech. "Family is everything," she said, tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this to us? We made a mistake, but suing your own parents, it's cruel." She reached for my hand, but I pulled back my chest, tight with anger. I saw through her tears they weren't regret, they were manipulation. I told her I needed time to think, but it was a lie to get her to leave. As she walked out, she turned back, her voice breaking. "You'll regret this, Bailey." I shut the door, my resolve hardening. Her sobs didn't change the fact that they had stolen $50,000 in my name. The worst came when my brother showed up. It was a rainy evening, and I was sorting case documents with Denise when the doorbell rang. He stood on my doorstep, soaked, his usual swagger gone. For the first time, he looked desperate. "My company's done," he admitted, his voice low. "Bankruptcy's official. I messed up. Okay, I'm sorry." He begged me to drop the lawsuit, claiming he'd pay me back somehow. His eyes darted nervously, like he was waiting for me to cave. I remembered every time he'd belittled me, every dollar I'd sent to prop up his dreams while he laughed in my face. I shook my head. "You don't get to fix this with words," I said, my voice steady. He pleaded again, but I closed the door. Later that night, I sent him a single text. No more bread. It was the last thing I'd say to him before the court date. Denise was my rock through it all. We met at her place the next day, sitting on her couch with coffee mugs and my stack of evidence. She'd been through her own battles, standing up to her family when they tried to control her life. "They'll push every button they know," she warned, her voice calm but firm. "Don't let them get in your head." She helped me rehearse what I'd say in court, running through questions Carla, my lawyer, might face. Denise's confidence steadied me when I doubted myself. She reminded me why I was doing this, not just for the money, but to reclaim my life. We stayed up late reviewing my app's transaction logs and bank statements, making sure every detail was perfect. Her support kept me focused even when my family's words echoed in my mind. Their pressure didn't stop. Dad left voicemails, each one angrier, accusing me of betraying their trust. Mom sent long texts mixing apologies with pleas to keep this private. My brother tried calling, but I let it go to voicemail. His messages grew frantic, mentioning creditors, him, and blaming me for making things worse. I didn't respond. Their desperation only confirmed what I'd suspected. They knew they were caught. My app had tracked every cent I'd given them, thousands over the years, and now I had proof of the loan they'd taken in my name. Carla said the case was strong, but warned me about the emotional toll. "They'll try to guilt you until the end," she said. I nodded, ready for it. I kept working coding through long days at the startup to stay grounded. My colleagues noticed I was quieter, but I didn't share details. At night, I'd meet with Carla or Denise, refining the case. Every call from my family felt like a test, but I held firm. They'd spent years taking from me, dismissing my dreams, and now they wanted mercy. I wasn't giving it. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I was ready. The courtroom in Albuquerque was colder than I expected, the air heavy with the weight of what was about to unfold. I stood at the plaintiff's table, my lawyer, Carla Martinez, beside me as the judge called the case. My family sat across the room, Dad with his jaw clenched, Mom staring at the floor, and my brother slouched, avoiding my gaze. The gallery was nearly empty, just a few court staff and Denise, who gave me a reassuring nod from the back. I took a deep breath, clutching the folder of evidence that had taken weeks to compile. This was it, the moment I'd reclaim my life. Carla presented our case with precision. She laid out the email confirmations from the bank showing the loan application in my name. She displayed bank statements with unauthorized payments tied to my brother's company. My app's transaction logs projected on a screen detailed every cent I'd given my family, thousands for their bills, none of which I'd questioned until now. I testified, my voice steady, despite the knot in my chest explaining how I'd discovered the $50,000 loan through Grandpa's warning. The judge listened, her face unreadable as I described years of supporting my family only to learn they'd betrayed me. My parents' lawyer argued they'd acted out of desperation, but Carla countered with evidence of their deliberate deception. The room felt suffocating, but I kept my eyes on the judge, not my family. The verdict came faster than I expected. The judge ruled in my favor, declaring the loan fraudulent. My family was ordered to pay $15,000 in damages, a fraction of the loan, but enough to hold them accountable. The court also mandated they assume full responsibility for the remaining debt, removing my name from the loan. My brother's company, already bankrupt, was officially dissolved, its assets seized to cover creditors. Dad and Mom faced their own debts. Mortgage payments they couldn't meet, credit card bills piling up. The judge's gavel echoed in my ears, a sound of justice but also finality. I'd won, but the victory felt hollow as I glanced at my family's defeated faces. I didn't speak to them after the hearing. Mom tried to approach me, her eyes wet, but I turned away. My brother called out my name, his voice, but I kept walking. Dad just stood there silent, his shoulders slumped. I left the courthouse with Carla and Denise, the weight of their betrayal still pressing on me. That night, I blocked their numbers. No more calls, no more texts, no more guilt trips. I was done carrying their burdens. A week later, I moved into a new apartment in downtown Albuquerque. It was small but bright with a view of the Sandia Mountains through a single window. I unpacked my few belongings, clothes, books, my laptop, feeling a strange mix of freedom and loneliness. I'd spent years building a life they couldn't touch, and now it was mine alone. Denise helped me settle in, bringing takeout and a bottle of wine to celebrate. "You did it," she said, raising her glass. I smiled, but the ache in my chest lingered. I'd fought for justice, but I'd lost the family I once thought I could save. I heard through a mutual friend that my parents were struggling to keep their house. Foreclosure notices had started arriving, their savings drained by legal fees and debts. My brother had moved back in with them, his dreams of being a tech mogul gone. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for them, but the memory of their lies, of the loan, the mockery the years of taking kept me grounded. I'd given them enough. Now I was building a future for myself, one where their voices couldn't reach me. The dust settled after the trial, but the fallout for my family was just beginning. I learned through a former neighbor that the Thornton had lost their house. The bank foreclosed when Dad and Mom couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments, their savings gutted by legal fees, and the $15,000 judgment they owed me. They'd moved into a small rental on the outskirts of Albuquerque, a far cry from the home they'd clung to. My brother Ryan was no longer the self-proclaimed entrepreneur. His company gone, he now worked as a retail clerk at a local electronics store, ringing up customers and stocking shelves. I didn't feel joy hearing this, just a quiet acknowledgement that their choices had caught up with them. Meanwhile, my life took a different path. My hard work at the tech startup paid off with a promotion to lead programmer. The raise pushed my salary to $80,000 a year, enough to afford a sleek new apartment in the heart of Albuquerque. It had hardwood floors, a modern kitchen, and a balcony overlooking the city's lights. I decorated it sparingly, a few plants, a cozy rug, a desk for my coding projects. Every corner of that space was mine, earned through years of grit and sacrifice. Yet late at night, staring at the city skyline, I felt a pang of loneliness. I'd built a life free from their control, but it came at the cost of family ties I once hoped to mend. Old college friends who'd stayed in touch through the chaos. Over coffee at a downtown cafe, Scott asked the question that lingered in my mind. "Was it worth it, Bailey?" he said, stirring his latte. "Cutting them off like that." His tone wasn't judgmental, just curious. I paused, tracing the rim of my mug. The lawsuit had given me justice, but the emptiness was real. Ruth chimed in, her voice, gentle. "You're stronger than anyone I know, but you seem alone." She wasn't wrong. I'd won my freedom, but the silence in my apartment was louder than I expected. Their words stayed with me, forcing me to reflect on what I'd gained and lost. Looking back, I realized the lessons this ordeal taught me. My family's betrayal using my name for a $50,000 loan showed me the importance of setting boundaries early. I'd spent years giving them money, believing it was my duty, only to learn they saw me as a resource, not a daughter. If I'd drawn a line sooner, I might have avoided the pain. The lawsuit, though grueling, was my way of protecting myself. It wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my right to a future they tried to steal. Legal action, I learned, is sometimes the only way to hold people accountable, even those you love. My app tracking every dollar I gave them became my shield proof that their family-first mantra was a lie. I don't regret my choices, but I carry the weight of them. To anyone out there facing something similar, family who take more than they give, who guilt you into sacrificing your dreams, set your boundaries now. Don't wait until they've taken everything. Check your credit, protect your finances, and don't be afraid to use the law if you must. You deserve to live a life that's yours. If you've been through this, share your story. Speak up in the comments or tell someone you trust. Your voice matters, and it might help someone else find the courage to stand up.